Somewhere along the winding road of awakening, a quiet moment arrived. Perhaps after a spiritual breakthrough or the collapse of something once central to your identity. And in that stillness, something unexpected happened. You stopped feeling driven. At first, the insight was powerful. You saw through the illusions, the roles, the endless noise. Life grew quiet, and with that silence came peace. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the spark dimmed. The fire that once pushed you forward faded. You're not alone. Many seekers, empaths, introspective souls, those who have glimpsed behind the veil, reach this point and ask, why do I feel so numb after awakening? This isn't depression. It isn't failure. It's something ancient, something Jung hinted at, but few today truly understand. In this video, we're not just going to talk about motivation. We're going to explore what's really happening in your psyche after awakening, and why this seeming emptiness might be the most important part of your transformation. It didn't happen overnight. There wasn't a dramatic fall, no grand collapse, just a slow, quiet fading, like your soul turned down the volume and never turned it back up. You stopped chasing things, not because you gave up, but because the chase stopped making sense. You weren't angry. You weren't broken. You were just tired, but not the kind of tired that sleep can fix. There's a subtle grief here, a silent kind of mourning. You remember who you were, the person who made vision boards, who devoured self-help books, who felt fire in their chest when talking about their dreams. That person feels distant now, not dead, but dissolved. And the questions begin to whisper louder. Why does nothing excite me anymore? Why do my old goals feel meaningless? Is this what awakening was supposed to feel like? You thought awakening would set your soul ablaze. Instead, it left you sitting on the floor, staring at the ceiling, wondering why everything feels hollow. I remember a friend once told me, I used to cry over not achieving enough. Now I don't even care if I achieve anything at all. This is what we could call post-awakening limbo. It's that surreal in-between. You've stepped out of the illusion, but haven't stepped fully into something else. And it's deeply disorienting, because no one warned you about this part. You were promised bliss, clarity, maybe even divine purpose. Instead, you got stillness, fog, a loss of meaning. But here's the secret most spiritual circles skip over. This pause is sacred. It's not a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that you're breaking through. Carl Jung would say this isn't a breakdown. It's a transition. The old scaffolding of your identity, the structures that gave your life meaning, are falling away. And in this strange quiet, your ego doesn't know what to do. It's used to striving, proving, achieving. But now, those instincts feel empty. You're not lazy. You're not lost. You're between stories, between the person you were and the one you're becoming. Carl Jung, often called the father of analytical psychology, never used the trendy language of spiritual awakening. But he knew exactly what happened when the unconscious became conscious. He said, enlightenment doesn't come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And when you begin to see the truth of who you are, not who you pretended to be, not who the world asked you to be, but your deeper self, something collapses. You see, for most of your life, your motivation was fueled by your ego identity, the image of yourself you believed was real. That me wanted to achieve, to succeed, to be recognized, to be safe. Not bad things. In fact, they're necessary for early psychological development. Jung called this version of the self the persona, the mask we wear to navigate society. It's the role you play, the version of you that fit in, worked hard, sought approval. But awakening shatters the mask. And suddenly, all the goals, dreams, and checklists that once made sense no longer do. They feel foreign, like clothes tailored for someone else. That's why you feel lost. Not because you lack direction, but because the compass you were using is no longer valid. It pointed toward validation, achievement, control. But now those North Stars have dimmed. Jung would say, your ego hasn't disappeared. It's just confused. It's lost the map. And until a new one emerges, your internal engine goes quiet. This is why traditional motivation feels so hard after awakening. Because what used to drive you, fear of failure, desire for success, hunger for recognition, is no longer compelling. And yet, nothing new has fully taken its place. Here's where the real shift begins. Jung believed we are not here to destroy the ego, but to integrate it, to move from a fragmented self to a whole one. He called this process individuation, the journey of aligning your conscious ego with your deeper unconscious self, the capital S self, not the performer, not the pleaser, not the protector, but the core of your being, the still point within you that's connected to everything. And the self has very different priorities. It doesn't care about applause. It doesn't chase clarity. It seeks truth, not just personal truth, but cosmic, archetypal truth, the kind that doesn't need explanation. It just resonates. So what's happening now? This pause, this lack of drive, isn't failure. It's recalibration. Your psyche is rejecting anything fake, forced, or fueled by the old identity. Jobs, relationships, plans. If they were built on the persona, they're now up for review. This is why awakening feels so raw, so destabilizing, because you've left the stage, but haven't found the next act. The script is gone, the audience is quiet, and now you wait. Not passively, but attentively, because something deeper is stirring, and it's not a motivation that pushes, it's one that pulls. So what comes after the collapse? Nothing. And that's the terrifying part. Not the dramatic nothingness of despair, but a quieter, more sacred kind. A stillness so deep it doesn't even announce itself. You just stop. You stop striving. You stop pretending. You stop reacting. Not because you gave up, because something in you is being stripped down to essence. Carl Jung had a word for this inner reversal. Enantiodromia, the tendency of things to turn into their opposite. After years, maybe decades of being fueled by ambition, striving and structure, the pendulum swings. From I must do everything to why do anything at all. And this swing isn't a mistake. It's the very heartbeat of transformation. In myth and ancient symbolism, this is the hermit phase, the descent, the pause before rebirth. In biology, it's the moment a caterpillar enters the cocoon and dissolves. Not rests, dissolves. Its old form liquefies. There's no structure, no direction, no identity, just goo. That's what you are right now. Psychological goo. Not the old self, not yet the new one, just a consciousness suspended in between. And goo doesn't hustle. Goo doesn't write 5-year plans. Goo doesn't post inspirational quotes. It simply is. And this is where most people panic. The ego wants action. It wants certainty, labels, meaning. But the self whispers something far more profound. Let go. I'm building something deeper. Here's the danger. Modern spirituality often skips this part. It rushes to the light, the joy, the high vibration lifestyle. But Jung would warn, if you skip the darkness, you skip the gold. Because the void is not empty. It's full of unmet shadow, of ancient grief, of forgotten parts of you waiting to be remembered. This sacred pause is where the unconscious finally has space to rise, not just to be noticed, but to be felt, to be held. And your psyche, infinitely wise, knows that if you don't pause, you'll just rebuild the same mask again. So it stalls you. It removes your clarity. It pulls the brakes on your motivation, not to punish you, but to protect your becoming. You're not behind. You're inside. Inside the cocoon. Inside the breakdown that is really a breakthrough. Inside the mystery that no book or teacher can rush. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it's disorienting. But what if this goo phase isn't the end? What if it's the exact alchemy needed to make room for the self to emerge? Eventually, something begins to stir. Not a loud revelation, not a flash of cosmic fireworks, more like a quiet pull, a subtle nudge, a whisper that doesn't say, go back, but rather, begin again. but differently. You're not rebuilding the old structure. You're laying the foundation for something far more honest, something aligned. And here's the key. This new movement doesn't come from the ego. It's not fueled by status, fear of missing out, or the need to be impressive. It's something deeper, older, softer. Carl Jung called it the emergence of the self, not a concept, not a personality upgrade, but the surfacing of your authentic center, your soul-led compass. You begin to feel drawn to things, not because they promise success, but because they feel true. Your body responds, your heart leans in, your mind softens, and slowly your life starts to rearrange itself, not around tasks or titles, but around resonance. You no longer chase motivation. You notice what naturally wants to move through you. You're not pushing anymore. You're listening and responding. This is a very different kind of energy. It doesn't spike like adrenaline. It hums like alignment. And because of that, it lasts. You find yourself creating, not for attention, but for expression. Saying no, not out of fear, but from clarity. Choosing quiet, not because you've given up, but because you've tuned in. You start living from the inside out. Your life becomes less about control and more about coherence. This is the new fuel, the self's motivation, not to impress, but to express, to embody, to become. It may not look ambitious from the outside. You may not be crushing goals or hustling hard, but internally you're rooted, and what grows from that place is real. So if you're still in the fog, trust this. The spark hasn't died. It's just been rewired, and soon you'll feel it return, not as pressure, but as purpose. The world taught you to ask, what should I do? But now a deeper question emerges. What is quietly calling me? You stop planning your life like a spreadsheet and start listening for the subtle invitations, the ones that don't shout, but whisper. Where once you asked, how can I prove myself? Now you ask, what feels honest? What feels like me? This shift marks the rebirth of motivation, not as pressure, but as participation. You're no longer dragging yourself through a checklist of expectations. Instead, you're moving in rhythm with something wiser than ambition, alignment. Carl Jung called this the symbolic life, a life not dictated by convention or approval, but by intuition, meaning, and the language of the soul. That means your success may not always look loud. It might not earn applause, but it will feel real because it's rooted in integrity, not image. You still feel waves, confusion, grief, even fatigue. That's being human, but you no longer feel like you're betraying yourself just to keep up. And the irony? This kind of devotion, quiet, honest, soulful, often creates more impact than hustle ever could, because it's sustainable, because it's sincere, because it comes from a place that doesn't flicker when the winds of the world blow. So let your ambition evolve. Let it become service. Let it become creation, not competition. Let it arise from stillness, not scarcity. You haven't lost your fire. You're just learning to burn clean. So if you've been feeling lost, uninspired, disconnected, know this. You are not broken. You're becoming. The old fire didn't die. It burned down the scaffolding. It made space for something deeper, a flame that doesn't flicker with the winds of the world. Carl Jung never promised the path would be easy. He knew it would shake the very foundations of who you thought you were. But he also knew this. Only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life. And right now you're living in the paradox. The quiet between stories, the silence that isn't empty, but full of your future. If this spoke to something inside you, a feeling you couldn't quite name, an ache you thought was yours alone, I invite you to share in the comments. What has this journey felt like for you? And if you want more reflections like this, rooted in soul, psychology, and the quiet truths of transformation, subscribe to Psychiatric, because awakening is not the end. It's where your real story begins.